The Grove Museum, also officially known as the Carl Collins House, was built by enslaved craftspeople in 1840 during what is known as the antebellum period. This plantation house is located in Leon County of Tallahassee, Florida, and was constructed during the term of Territorial Governor Richard Keith Call. The Grove is sitting on a 10-acre piece of land that was part of the 640-acre tract purchased by Call in 1825. Call came to Tallahassee after his single term as territorial delegate to the United States House of Representatives. He was a member of former President Andrew Jackson's inner circle and used his connections to secure a position with the federal land office in Tallahassee. The first house built on the property was far different from the Grove Museum we know now. The first house was described as a plain building of several rooms on one floor with outside chimneys and porches. It is said that Richard Keith Call's wife, Mary Kirkman Call, was responsible for the naming of the grove, calling it Hickory Grove. During the 1940s, the grove went up for sale and was purchased by the great-granddaughter of Richard Keith Call, Mary Call Collins, in 1942. Mary was the wife to former governor and state senator Thomas Leroy Collins. Collins can be described as the man behind the grove in respects to the African American community. During his time as the governor, Collins was, quote, a supporter of the status quo to a proponent of expanding civil rights for African Americans through federal legislation, biracial cooperation, and moderately toned, peaceful political discourse. In the years of 1955 and 1957, Collins denounced the Florida state legislators' attempts to nullify the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in Brown v. Topeka, Kansas Board of Education. In March 1960, during a televised statewide address, Collins stated that he saw segregation as, quote, morally wrong, unchristian, undemocratic, and unrealistic. When asked about the work of civil rights demonstrators, Collins stated, quote, we can never stop Americans from struggling to be free. We can never stop Americans from hoping and praying that someday, in some way, this idea that is embedded in our Declaration of Independence is one of these truths that are inevitable, that all men are created equal, that somehow there will be a reality and not just an illusionary distant goal.
I came to recognize that there had to be change. I don't think anybody can serve as governor without feeling a deep sense of responsibility to every citizen of the state. And I realize that deep in my heart. That person out there, that child or that old person or that your other person, regardless of color, I had a responsibility to that person. And as that person's governor, and they had a right to look to me as their governor. And this was a very moderating sort of feeling that displaced completely all of my former sense of feeling of separation. I knew we had to change in Florida, and I was desperately anxious to see us use good judgment and good sense and good neighborly relationships in order to accomplish that. I made it clear as we saw this change coming that we were going to change, but that we were going to do that within the framework of being lawful and also orderly.
In 1964, President Johnson appointed Collins the head of Community Relations Service, also known as CRS. This was a new agency created by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In March of 1965, Collins was sent to Selma following Bloody Sunday. His job was to devise a solution and present it to the opposing sides. Collins convinced the state officials to restrain the police and allow the activists to proceed. By 1977, Collins had returned to Tallahassee, and he and his wife sold the Grove in 1985. In 1991, Thomas Leroy Collins passed away at the Grove, and and he and his wife were laid to rest in the cemetery located on the property. The grove is presently the property of the Florida Department of State and serves as a museum. Aside from the work of Collins during the Civil Rights Movement, there was little mention of the African Americans who were enslaved at the Carl Collins residence or those who served as servants to the various families who occupied the grove.